And conflict is introduced by the word but. It's the most important word in storytelling. Now, you can use an alternative. You can use yet, however, on the other hand. It is the most important word. And I know if you're listening to this, your first thought, your reaction to that may be, but haven't you heard, Michael, that the word but, people disregard everything that you said before that if you use the word but? Yes, you're correct in everyday conversation. If I go up to my partner after this interview and I go up and I say, oh, honey, look at you. Your hair looks beautiful. That blouse is stunning as always, but I'm not so sure about the jeans. She's not going to remember the comment about the hair and the blouse. I'm sleeping on the couch tonight, right? The dogs don't want anything to do with me. They're like, are you stupid? Did you say that to mom, really? That's everyday conversation. However, it's just the opposite in storytelling because but, and this has been proven with brain science, it engages the brain. It tells the brain something's about to change.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Thrive and Achieve with your host, Dr. Matt Markel. Thrive and Achieve is the only podcast where professionals help professionals to succeed in career and wealth. Now, here's your host, Dr. Matt Markel.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Thrive and Achieve, where professionals help professionals thrive in their career and achieve financial success. Today, I am super excited to introduce Michael Davis. Michael empowers speakers, leaders, and professionals to enhance their influence with impactful presentations and touching stories. He's a very successful and influential speaker, trainer, and coach, and has assisted speakers on 5 continents to develop presentations that have been viewed over 5 million times. He's the founder of Speaker CPR and the author of over 7 books. Michael, welcome to Thrive and Achieve.
Thank you so much, Matt. I always love an opportunity to talk communication and storytelling.
This is fantastic. Well, tell me a little bit about your professional journey. How did you get to where you are today? And I have to ask, I heard there was a first grade story that kind of set the stage for where you are today. So we don't usually go back to first grade on this, but let's do that today.
Maybe after today you'll want to, because that is the source of many of the stories that limit us or born early in life. But for me, I was the class clown in first grade, and I loved to make my classmates laugh every day. And one day my teacher, Mrs. Grimm, her real name, looked at me and said, well, Michael, since you love interrupting my class so much, today at nap time, you get to stand up in front of the class on top of your desk. So a couple hours later, Matt, there I am. It's mid-afternoon. Lights are down. You can hear the rain pelting the window and the steel roof, and my classmates have their heads resting on their desk. I'm standing on top of mine. And for 40 minutes, they silently taunted me, teased me, made faces and laughed and pointed. And when 40 minutes was up and Mrs. Grimm said, you may get down now. I hope you've learned your lesson. I had never stand in front of people again. That was awful. And that imprinted a story on me. I call it the sticky note effect now, but that sticky note was when you stand in front of people, you will be embarrassed, humiliated, made fun of, rejected. Don't ever do that again. So I didn't for 25 years, never voluntarily, until I was a financial planner. I'm 31 years old, sitting in my boss's office, and he says, you're not doing a really good job bringing people into this business. We're going to have you start presenting retirement planning workshops. My first thought is, I'm going to do what? My boss, Joe, had no idea. He didn't know the story. I didn't share it with anybody. Heck, I'd forgotten about it for a long time, but I just had the fear. But now I've got a bigger fear. I might lose my job if I don't do this, so I got to go out and give the workshops. And I do that, and 6 weeks later, I'm sitting back in his office. And I failed to mention that he was a little intimidating to me. He had this huge oak desk and a high-back leather chair, and his slick-back hair made him look like a mafia boss. So when he talked to me, it's like I'm already intimidated. So I'm back in there 6 weeks later, and he looks at me and says, I don't believe this. You've given 3 workshops and not one new client. You really suck at this presenting thing. You either fix this or you finished. Now I'm desperate. It's not just go out and give workshops. I got to figure out how to do this in a hurry. And I eventually found an organization that works with speakers, really works with their fear of speaking. Thought I'd go to 2 or 3 meetings and then I'd figure this out and save my career. 31 years later, I'm still part of that organization. And that was the first step toward leading me down this road where I am today, where I'm now a communications expert, some people say. I present, I'm a coach, I'm a trainer, I've written books. I've done all this on the power of communication and specifically storytelling. But that's how I got my start on top of a desk.
Wow. I have this, I thought you were going to tell a version of that where, okay, you give your first workshop, first thing you do is you stand on the desk and start giving the start talking to the people. But that's
I
fantastic.
I have done that, and what I found, and you have to as a speaker, when you're standing in front of a group, you have to think like your audience. And I noticed one day when I was doing this, the people were so focused on me, afraid of me falling off the desk, that I stopped doing it because they were losing the whole point. So I just describe it now instead of doing it.
That's fantastic. So clearly doubling down on your speaking capabilities, doubling down on your storytelling capabilities. That's made not only a big difference in your financial career or your financial profession, but also led to an entirely new line of work for you as well. So typically the folks that listen to this show are professionals. They're working in business, sort of like you were as a financial planner. How, for them, do you see like these skills from better speaking, better communication, better storytelling? How will that translate into for them in their leadership, in their team dynamics, in career opportunities? Kind of like I think we all agree that we want to be better communicators, but are there some tangible things that they could take away?
Yes, it's an excellent question, Matt. And look, I'm not the first person to say this. The heart of everything we do in business is communication. That's somewhat generic. What does that mean? It means in every interaction we have with people, whether it's in the hallway, it's a Zoom call or a Riverside call like we're doing here, in email, every bit of that has power to either have an impact or be quickly forgotten. And the problem for most people is it's quickly forgotten. And what I discovered early in my speaking journey was that speaking, storytelling, they're all learnable skills that have certain patterns that best appeal to the human brain. Now, I'm going to use the word speaker here, but it's leader, it's salesperson, it's leadership in your own home, in your community. Don't get caught up on the word speaker as much as communicator. So when you're giving a short presentation to the team on a Monday morning, you can do that how most people do, and people are checking out within 60 seconds and checking their phones because it's the same old thing. Or you can use narrative. You can use that to set up, what point am I going to make? How am I going to grab their attention by using conflict within that? And then how we're going to resolve that story so that people hear the point and see how it applies to their lives. And that's a series of learnable processes and skills.
That's great. I think what I've seen a lot of times in corporate presentations, et cetera, is it's very much speaker centric. That I'm viewing all this through my eyes, and I want to talk about this, and I want to communicate these facts, and it's in my best interest for you to remember them this way, and that's going to come across in how they prepare their material and how they deliver their material. But I think what you're saying is like, you know, they will tune out. The audience, you'll lose your audience and very rapidly, especially now with people having phones available just as like a constant source of distraction. If you can set this up such a way that you see it through their eyes, what do they want to see about this? How are they going to consume the information? And how are just humans in general set up to receive and process information? So
That's an excellent point, and it's something I teach every person I work with is think like your audience. If you're one-on-one, what is that other person thinking? Pretty easy to figure out. Ask. Ask questions until you get to the emotional root of the problem they're facing. But even as speakers, leaders speaking to a group of people, you can do that too. Just imagine you're sitting in the fourth row of an auditorium listening to you speak. What's going through your mind? What could be the audience's concerns? Storytelling, the most effective narrative, is about your journey. However, it's in the service of the audience. And that's why if you want to be effective, you're going to have to open up your armor a little bit and expose yourself as far as challenges you've had, fears you've experienced, and roadblocks you've encountered and eventually overcome. A lot of people in business are hesitant to do that because they think it shows weakness. It's just the opposite. I mean, the word authenticity is a bit overused today. I like to call it realness. But when you're real with people and they say you're like them, that opens them up to trust you even more.
That's so important. See, I see it in myself, and I've learned over the several decades I've been on this planet and several decades I've been in the business that we like to think that we're different, that we're the only ones that see this way, that we're the only ones that feel this way. Only I am going through this. But that's actually not true. We're all very much feel the same things. And what happens then is the stories that you have, the feelings that you have, they're not just for you. But if you can take and help your audience by sharing those in a way that's not set up like, but the phrase I like to use is don't share your wounds, share your scars.
Yes.
So basically, if you're still going through it, you don't want to probably be talking about it right now because A, you're going to be in a bad headspace and that's a different type of conversation. You're gonna but share the scars that you have. I went through this. I went through a very difficult financial time. I went through a time where I had bought my ex-wife out of out of our house, and the only money I had went for the to pay the mortgage payment, and I was living in milk crate furniture, which actually was a true story of mine at the time. But but I'm through that now. So you share your scars because everybody that you talk to is going to be feeling typically some aspect of a very similar story as you are.
Love that. And it makes me want to hear more about your experience. There's a universality to the most impactful stories, and it's not on the surface about you with crate furniture. It taps into my first house when I was looking at empty rooms and thinking, okay, I got to go to IKEA. I got to use cardboard boxes. I had an old card table, was my dining room table. So the external factors, you buying out your ex-wife, maybe not everybody can relate to that, but they can relate to the image of the crates serving as your furniture. We've got our own version of that. What's important about storytelling is you give just enough detail with sensory details or with emotions that we tap into. And it's like, I can relate to Matt because, oh, that makes me think of that. And that's okay for an audience to do because now they're buying into your narrative and it's no longer just about you. It's about them.
Excellent, excellent. Since we're on stories so much, can you walk us through like a story structure that professionals can use?
Yes, there's a structure I use. I didn't invent it, but it's evolved and I put my own twist on it. I call it storytelling ABS, ABS. It stands for and but so. Now it sounds simplistic, and it's actually derived from Hollywood and people in the film business. The and part gives us the setup, simple context where we're introduced to a main character and we see this person in their everyday life. We give 3 details about the person and their circumstances. Big mistake a lot of people make, Matt, is they go into this long explanation, detail, 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 detail. It becomes what we call an and story, and that's boring. At the time we're recording this, we're here in the holiday season. We just got through Thanksgiving. We're going to get together with our families during the holidays in December. You and I each have that family member who goes on and on and on and on. It's like, is there a point to this story? That's what we call an and structure. It's just a bunch of phrases or concepts connected by the word and. We need a little bit of that to give context, but after that, we've got to get to the next part, which is the conflict. And conflict is introduced by the word but. It's the most important word in storytelling. Now, you can use an alternative. You can use yet. However, on the other hand, it is the most important word. And I know if you're listening to this, your first thought, your reaction to that may be, but haven't you heard, Michael, that the word but, people disregard everything that you said before that if you use the word but? Yes, you're correct in everyday conversation. If I go up to my partner after this interview and I go up and I say, oh, honey, look at you. Your hair looks beautiful. That blouse is stunning as always, but I'm not so sure about the jeans. She's not going to remember the comment about the hair and the blouse. You know, I'm sleeping on the couch tonight, right? The dogs don't want anything to do with me. They're like, are you stupid? Did you say that to mom, really? That's everyday conversation. However, it's just the opposite in storytelling because and this has been proven with brain science, it engages the brain. It tells the brain something's about to change. So I can talk about, there's so many different ways you can tell your stories, by the way. I can introduce, and I have done this with a speech. So there I am, first grade. The lights are down. You can hear the rain pelting the windows and steel roof. Kids are resting their heads. It's nap time. One kid is standing on his desk. And that's the but moment. It's like, what do you mean standing on his desk? Kid, it's nap time. What's he doing? So I just I threw a curveball to your brain and said, this is going in a new direction. And we need that. That's the conflict, because that's where emotion is engaged. The brain loves to be fooled for a short time, or it loves curiosity and wants to know what comes next. And we need to have some conflict, but we don't want to stay there forever. Ultimately, we have to resolve the conflict, or else people will walk away a bit irritated with us. You and I were talking baseball earlier. Imagine if this year in the World Series, in the 8th inning of Game 7, which is a great World Series, Toronto's leading the Dodgers by a run, and all of a sudden, all of your power goes out. You don't get to find out for the next 72 hours what happened. You're going to be unsettled. It's like, I need to know what happened. So we have to resolve it. And that's the S part, the so. So this happened. This new idea was brought to the main character by another character, somebody I call the compass character, gives new direction to the main character. They implement the new idea, and after a while, they succeed, they overcome the problem, they achieve the goal. And not only do they achieve the goal, they're transformed in the process. And because of that, they now have a new perspective on life, and they share that message with others. That's the simple ABS formula. There's more to it than that, but that's a simple structure you can use right away. It takes many people are familiar with the hero's journey, which is a beautiful journey. The challenge with it is for business, it's got 12 and sometimes 18 steps. If you're in business, you don't want to go through a 12-step process. The 3-step is a good place to start, and then evolve the story from there.
Right. Yeah. When I was a CEO, if someone came in and said like, okay, I'm going to walk you through 18 parts of this, and they haven't sent me a pre-read on it, we're going to be cutting that meeting short. So
Your head's going to explode, and you're going to say, please leave.
exactly. I love that and but so, because it's the setup. Every day this happens. The but is the conflict. One day, this he was forced to stand on the desk, and then how was he going? What was he going to do with that? He now carries the shame for 25 years. Uh, you know, until or so he finds the group that shows him the way, or the person who shows him hey, let me introduce you to these investors, and they'll teach a different way to view money, or whatever the pivot that you need to have is. And it's you can probably I'm pretty sure you can map every Pixar story to that format that you just said.
That's
Every
exactly it.
everyone every day this happens. Here's detail, detail, detail. One day, the conflict, and then they work through the conflict, go through the stages, whatever. Then until the compass character comes and shows him, or they find the solution, or they have an epiphany, or they receive the vision, or whatever it is, and now they see the way forward.
Absolutely. By the way, you can facilitate my next workshop. You got it. You understand it. And some people will complain that that's formulaic. Yeah, there is some formula to it. And here's why. It's how the human brain wants to consume story. Now, sometimes in the film world, you've got these avant-garde, film noir, all that. Those are interesting movies, but they don't sell well, because the masses, our brains are all wired the same way with this. Doesn't matter what you are externally. Internally, this is how we work. We want these certain beats. And abs is the foundation. And on top of that, there are actually 9 elements that go in. We won't go to them here. There's a lot of detail. But just know that if you have those 9 beats in order, people cannot help but listen to you. So if you want to be a leader, a salesperson, or a community leader who has people eating out of your hands, discover these elements, and you will be that person people want to listen to. So you mentioned earlier, Matt, we have an attention problem. I'm not convinced we have an attention problem. You ever watch kids playing video games? Of course. How about people binge watching their favorite TV shows? They don't have an attention problem. What we have today is a getting and keeping attention problem, and we cannot use the traditional methods. You should never, ever start a meeting with, hey, good morning, good to be here, glad to see you. We have seconds to get people's attention, and the moment you start with something trite, boring, ordinary, At a subconscious level, people are thinking, I've heard this before. Where's my phone? We have to do something different to grab them from the first words.
So let's, excuse me. So let's talk about that. If you're preparing something like where you're trying to communicate some information, a quarterly update, a pitch, project review, which is a lot of dry information, but there may be an ask in there, or there should be. Usually, if you're briefing, there should be an ask. The how can you take what would normally be a lot of dry material? Excuse me.
It's that time of year, my friend. It's so dry out.
I had something go down the wrong the wrong way here. So
I get it. Now, you've got two choices here. You can edit this out or you can keep the humanness in and say, you know what? Sometimes this happens in an interview. Just roll with it.
yeah, we'll be editing this out. Because there's no part of the ABS story that is me choking on coffee for 45 seconds. It's like after a while, I'm going to be like, they're going to be like, all right, they might scroll ahead a little bit. Did he make it? Yeah, okay, he made it.
So you create curiosity. I don't know. Did Matt make it to the end? Tune in next week.
Yeah, that's true. I guess if they see a podcast, come on after this one, it'll be they'll kind of know how it works. Like, have you ever done that? Since we're completely off the topic right now, if you're worried about a character, you look up in IMDb and you see that to see, is he in the next episode? Is he in all the episodes after that? And if you think a character is going to be killed off, they're like, no, he's in all the episodes. He makes it. So.
I sure have, and that just taps into the point made earlier. The brain is curious. We can't stand it. It takes a self-disciplined person not to go into IMDb and say, is he still on the show?
Yeah, I don't have that self-discipline. I kind of want to know. Okay, let's go back and do this one again. I might actually I'll put this whole little thing in like an outtake at the end.
You should. And let people know these things happen.
Okay, so great advice. If someone's creating a pitch like for senior leadership or doing something that's typically a little bit of a drier type topic, like a quarterly update to the C-suite, something like that. I know typically the way I've taught people to do things and people have taught me is like, there should always be an ask in there. It's, if you're just providing information that could be sent in an email. So there should be some sort of ask in there. But how do you take and distill this dry, sort of boring information into something not only that's clear, but also something that's compelling?
This is a very important question you're asking. And it really, it depends on who the audience is. And it also depends on what you want them to do. So what I mean by that is there are two types of audiences we speak to. One is the inner circle. That is a tiny number of people who know us, our world so well. They know all of our terminology that we can get a little lax with ABS. That's rare. Quick example, I work with a financial company here in Cincinnati, and I work with their analysts and their salespeople. So when I'm working with the analysts, their job is to go research stocks, specific equities, and take them to the investment committee. We don't have to do as much formal story structure with them. However, when I'm working with them, I say, because this is an investment committee, they're listening to these all day long, start off with your ask. I'm going to ask you to invest $10 million in company XYZ. And here's why. Then we'll craft a story. So let's say XYZ is a consumer goods company. I will have them tell the story of a typical XYZ customer going through their day. It's an ABS structure. Here's Susan. She is a working mom. She's a very busy life, and this is her everyday life. But she has this problem, and it comes to getting her kids to daycare. And company XYZ has a solution to that that's going to help make her life easier. And XYZ is the compass in the story that provides the solution. And now we see her life better at the end because she's now bought that product. What is the point of the story? There are 1 million Susans out there, and XYZ has the potential to serve them all. The growth capabilities are endless. Something along those lines. So here's what we're going to ask you to do. Here's a story. And now I'm going to give you some data if you want it. When I work with people like that especially, I tell them, don't answer unasked questions. This is one of the biggest challenges I see with business presentations. They are overloaded with information. One of two reasons. Number one, somebody has so much passion for the topic, they just can't wait to get it out. Most of the time, it's the second reason, which is what I experienced as a young financial advisor. I was so insecure, Matt, I was so fearful, and I thought I had to impress people to prove that I belonged in that room and that they should do business with me. So I did data dumps. And I'm publicly admitting this. I continue to because I'm a recovering scared speaker. I used to put clients and prospective clients through 3 and 4 hour meetings. I can't believe they did business with me, but I did. That was not unusual back in the 90s. I've learned ever since that presentations are all about understanding the audience, knowing the questions that are in their minds, and addressing those questions as soon as possible. You do that with stories. That's how you earn trust. You demonstrate expertise. And then if they have questions, let them ask them. But in business, we have to stop overloading people. Look, there's more information on this device right here than you can ever give me. Sometimes it's actually correct. There's so much misinformation out there. That's not what people want. They want to know, how can you distill all this information out there? If you understand my problem, how can you distill that and show me how to make my problem go away? That's what they want.
When I was working in defense, I worked for a very large defense company. Actually, we tripled the bookings for the P&L I was tech director of. I was working for the CTO, but I was also serving as like the tech director for this one P&L. We tripled our bookings when I joined that and took over as tech director, because we really looked at how we did our proposals. I told people, they crafted the way to write proposals, which is very much based on the storytelling, very much based on what you're talking about here. But I came up with this thing that they ended up calling Markel's rule of proposals, or Markel's number one rule of proposals, which is that every single word in there should be for one reason and one reason only. And that's to convince them to give you money. It's not to show them how smart you are, or to tell them how hard you worked on this, or to tell about the beautiful history of your company, or how many employees you have, or whatever. Those are potentially interesting facts. They're not germane to what your task is. Your task is, with this proposal, to convince them to give you the money. Or with your meeting, your task is to get them to sign up as clients, not to show them how smart you are. It's to get them to sign. And when people realize what's the goal, I think it opens up an entirely new aspect of like how they frame their messaging.
That's like an earth-shattering insight to most people too. It was to me when I learned that. And by the way, Matt, you just told a second type of ABS story. The first type we talked about is where you or I telling a story. We would be the main character who hits the roadblock. Somebody comes into our lives, gives us wisdom. Eventually we overcome the problem. In the one you just told, you were the compass. And the company you went to, they were living their everyday lives, getting proposals out, and I'm just making numbers up, obviously. They were getting 15% of a proposal acceptance. And they realized one day that if this continued, they were going to be in serious financial trouble because they had competitors coming into the market. They started scouring, they look around, try to solve it on their own. We don't know. Oh, we hired this guy named Dr. Matt. Now, we didn't know if it was going to work out. You never do when you first bring somebody in. And he started helping us massage and making some changes. And the next thing you know, started getting more people accepting their proposals. So by implementing Matt, or hiring Matt, bringing in his new perspective, we tripled the number. We're now at 45% and we're highly profitable. That's an ABS story right there. But you are the one who provides the solution. And that's the kind of stories I have people tell when they are salespeople or business leaders who are maybe attracting new employees, new members to the C-suite or something like that. You don't always have to be the person going through the struggle. You can provide the solution. The key is you can't be both characters. You have to be one or the other.
Right. Because you can't change from within. Typically, you have to have at least if you can, it doesn't resonate with how we view things.
No, people think one of two responses to that. Number one, oh, you're just special. I can't do that.
And then they're unrelatable, right?
It's unrelatable. It's like, okay, it's like the person who wins the Olympic gold. It's like, good for you. What's the lesson for me? The second is, I don't believe that's how it happened. And that isn't how it happened. And sometimes I work with folks when they have to overcome this problem and they can't really think about, where did I learn that lesson? And typically, when I push them to go back in time to when they were kids, there was someone in their lives, grandparent, uncle, aunt, parent, it doesn't matter who who demonstrated, they didn't always say it, but they demonstrated that characteristic that helped them get over the hump. And that's when it now becomes believable and it becomes more universal because we've all had somebody in our lives who had a positive impact that we still think about today that drives how we behave.
Amazing. So you're a very confident speaker. You've been doing this for a long, long time. A lot of people I know kind of struggle with the confidence. They were you in that 25-year period
Yeah.
between the desk and the Michael. You have to go teach these seminars, or you're out the door. And especially the bigger the audience, or the more powerful the audience, the more they struggle with confidence. Any tips that you can help them with on that? I know of some things that I would say, which are very much in like, look, the more prepared you are, the better you'll be able to respond. But what do you think?
Till last year, that was my number one answer.
Okay.
Preparation is critical. It will handle most of the challenges you have. However, in the last year, I've had insight, and my next book is coming out in January where it addresses this issue. There are 3 stories that each of us need to understand as leaders, salespeople, communicators, just as people. We need to know these 3 stories. And most of my colleagues in the coaching and training world will teach you a story structure. Look, ABS is not the only story structure. There are many, and they are all good. However, there are 2 more important stories we must know if we want our stories to land. And the first one is the story you tell yourself. I used the term sticky notes before. There are messages that we adopted as children and at key emotional moments in our lives that stuck these stories in us that hold us back. The second story is knowing the story the other people are telling themselves, whether it's an audience or it's one-to-one. And again, if we're speaking to an audience, it doesn't matter. It could be this audience of 3 or 303. You're not going to know everything that's in their minds, but you can have a pretty good feel for what's going on with them by talking to them before the event. Doing some research, you can find that out and you can adjust your story. Now, the reason those 2 are more important is that if you're not clear on what's going through your head when you go to give a presentation, and if you have no idea what's going on with them, you can have the best structured ABS story, hero's journey story, whatever structure you want. It's not going to land the way it could have because it's blocked. And the most important of those is the story you tell yourself. And I didn't discover that until 2 years ago.
That's so insightful because it touches in so much of what we see in psychology today, what we see in other aspects of things, whether it's neurolinguistic programming or whatever, that the how you view yourself, how you view what you expect to happen. If you're a Napoleon Hill fan, what you auto suggest will happen out of this, all those sorts of things are kind of tied into that story you tell yourself. I don't think I'm going to get through this. I think this is going to be a failure. I think this is going to be a disaster. You tell yourself that, and guess what? It probably will be. You think of like, and we see that, by the way, we see that in as a limiting belief in people in all aspects of their life. I'm not a lot of the people that I coach in my educational program talks about. They're like, I don't really deserve to be wealthy. That's for somebody else. That's for smarter people than me. So these limiting beliefs you tell yourself, that really is probably by far the the biggest thing that I think I see as a roadblock for people.
Well, I don't have the same in-depth background as you do, but as a story coach, I will tell you that, and it's an experience I had 2 years ago. It was like the heavens opened up and said, "Here's the answer you've been looking for." I was 60 2 years ago, and I was talking to my youngest son, and he asked me such an innocent question. He said, "Hey, why do you think your father abandoned you and your mom when you were 2 years old?" And I said, "I don't know. I guess he didn't think I was worth sticking around for." Oh my God. That's it. That's the answer I've been looking for. Matt, for my entire adult life, I've had this repeating pattern. I've been entrepreneurial since I was in my 20s. So I would get into a business. I was a financial planner. I was pretty much entrepreneurial then. So I would have some success and I'd get right to the point where I was going to make a huge breakthrough. And I started to self-sabotage and I would start failing and I would go down to this pit. It was like a roller coaster. Now, I never got destitute. I never was living out of my car, but it was this pattern. And I could see an income level where I capped out and where I hit bottom. It was just like this, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And I tried everything. You mentioned NLP. I studied Tony Robbins for years, studied Napoleon Hill, did all the mantras, everything I could think of, and I just couldn't get out of that. And then Sean asked me that question, and I gave those 6 simple words. I guess I wasn't worth sticking around for, however many words that is. And it's like a piece of puzzle from my life snapped into place, and I could see the whole picture. Every relationship I'd had, every business I'd been in, every career choice I'd made, I now understood that in the back of my brain on a sticky note that had been there since I was 2 was the message, you're not worth sticking around for. And it's why, now when I was in my piece, I used to brag to my friends, I'd never been dumped, and I hadn't. How could I have been dumped? I never gave anybody a chance to dump me because I knew eventually they were going to leave me because I'm not worth sticking around for. So I left first. I would leave jobs before I got fired, right? Because I'm not worth keeping around for. So that was embedded in me. And the moment I heard that come out of my mouth, I said, wow, that simple answer is it. Did I wake up the next day and have a happy life? No, but I knew I couldn't go back to the way it was. I was in that gray area. So I have a friend who is a psychologist who works with a lot of trauma work, first responders and soldiers. Told him this, and we created an exercise that was so simple, but it changed my frame of reference. And I just kept going through it day after day after day. And now it sits above my desk. And if I remember having one of those days, it's like, yes, you are worth sticking around for. And there's the proof. So that story no longer has a hold on me. And the postscript to that is there's nothing special about me. I wasn't the only person who adopted a lousy story when I was a kid. Every person in the world, if you're watching this, you've got them too. Matt, I know in your line of work, you deal with people all the time, right? We each have these. Are you willing to face it? And then to give it real power, not the story itself, but the solution to the problem, go share it with others. Every time I share that story, I've had people come back to me and say, wow, that I can relate. It's got them uncomfortable enough to say, I've got to go look and find what my story is so I can start to manage it.
Yeah, that absolutely amazing. One of the things I do myself, since we're all the same, right? I think we discussed it earlier. I don't know what your exercise is that you look at. I write myself note cards, and I review those every morning to get myself in the right mindset for tackling the day. And these could be things that talk about, why I can do this, why this is going to be successful. The when you're creating new programs, when you're doing entrepreneurial things, even if you're working as a professional, sometimes it can feel very lonely. As a CEO, it's
Yeah.
extremely lonely.
Yes.
No one is your friend. I mean, you have friends, of course, but like the it's very difficult to find someone to really talk and relate to because the people in your company, they're on the chessboard, right? So every time you have a discussion with them, it says it's as a superior to employee, or manager to employee. You can't talk to the board because the board probably doesn't really know what they're doing anyway. At least, and they're not going to know the details of the operation of the company. You confess too much, and like, wait a minute, this guy's having some mental issues. Let's get rid of him. So, and your, my spouse is, Tracy. She's fantastic. She doesn't know what it's like to be the CEO of something, so she can't, I can tell stories. I can tell the difficult thing I'm going through, but it's not exactly relatable to her. So this concept of how do you deal with that? So you don't end up in a mental headspace. My trick is I write myself 3x5 note cards and just review those in the morning because to show that, yes, you aren't bound by that story. You're not bound by what happened when you were 2 years old or when you got laid off by this company or when this program didn't work out or whatever it is. You're beyond that. You're bigger than that. You're better
Yeah.
than that. You've moved on beyond that, and you're the sum of a whole bunch of great, wonderful stories, not a couple of bad ones that fall in here or there.
These exercises will work. It's focus, and it's just a reminder that this is why that story is not true.
So why did your dad leave when you were 2 years old?
I don't know. Because my mother never really I never saw him after that. She didn't really say much about it. I would ask as a kid, and then eventually I just said, "Forget," because she got remarried when I was 3, and that's my dad. He's always been my dad. I still have him. Just who knows? He just didn't, feel like he could take care of a child and a wife. Who knows? He was a military man and he just kept traveling the world. I ended up better off for it, as far as I'm concerned. I got a great dad out of it.
Fantastic, fantastic. That's another thing too, is we maybe a little bit off the top of communication, but it's when bad things happen. I've had some tough things happen. I had, divorce, financial issues. Like I mentioned, the milk crate furniture.
Yeah.
I remember a time when we were out at a bar for happy hour during that time, and we were all sitting around the table telling stories of our projects and the programs that we were running. And I don't exactly remember what we were talking about because all I was doing at that time was the math in my head to see if I could afford another beer. We've all been through tough times, but usually I found is like when you get through that on the other side, things are a lot better and you're a lot stronger. And you look back at that person that was before, it's like, well, that's like a mini me. That's like a junior version of me. Now I'm so much stronger, better, smarter, capable, resilient.
Yes, and here's from a narrative standpoint, here's the most impactful part of what you just said. It's that moment when you're sitting there doing the calculation and you're looking at the bill. It's like, 14, 30, I got to leave a tip. I don't know if I can get another beer. This is going to be so embarrassing. That's what connects people because we've all been there. Those are the details that most people never put in their stories, Matt, because they don't understand that. And that's why it's important to have somebody else who's qualified. It doesn't always have to be a coach, but somebody who understands narrative structure to help you find those in your story because they're in there. You just don't see them because you lived it. So yeah, it happened, but those are the keys right there. Those little moments are what connect people to say they'll remember that story when they remember moments like that. And that means they'll remember the point of the story.
Awesome. If you could give every professional kind of like one communication skill, what would that be?
I'm going to give you two. Number
Okay.
one is, we've already touched upon one, is stop overloading with information. That's not what they need from you. They want your perspective. It is more valuable than you realize, as are your experiences. The second is when you're sharing information and telling stories, got to use silence. Silence is the most important delivery skill you can master because that's where the sale is made. And by sale, I don't always mean product or service. It's the idea. If you don't allow silence, you're not allowing the listener to consider the implication of what you just said into their lives. Call it the mental movie maker. Activate the mental movie maker in them and then let them play it out. Okay, so if I invest in your widget, okay, I can see. We got to give them a chance to do that. Most presenters don't. They're in such a hurry to get through all this information because my ego's now involved. I put all this together. I put hours into this presentation. You got to watch it. That's not effective. What can I take out is a question you should always be asking in your presentation and not hurt the impact of this.
Awesome. Okay. The way we end all these shows is a couple of rapid fire questions. So, what's one piece of career or financial advice that conventional wisdom, but you think is completely wrong?
It's all about following a career path step by step by step. There is no path anymore. Create your future and then just start taking action and embrace every single error you make because it is setting you down. It's course correction, but it is not a failure.
That is so spot on. That is my story. Every time I created people say, "Oh, Matt, you need to make your 10-year plans," and then I was like, "I can't do that." They've been in your 20s and 30s. So like, "What's your 10-year plan?" I was like, "I don't know. I have no idea what the world's gonna be like in 10 years. I have no idea what I want to be in 10 years. I don't even know." And they're like, "Okay, well, make a 5-year plan." So I'd try to make some 5-year plans, and then people will ask me later, it's like, "Matt, you must have had everything all figured out, Dr. Matt. You've done all these things. You must have had this really methodical plan." Take a guess how many 5-year plans I've had that worked out the way I
Zero.
planned it. 0, 0.0. That's how many worked out. But at the end of each 5 years, things were better than I could have possibly have imagined. Because
Yeah.
you can take the pivot along the way. You can see that this is an opportunity. You can see like, this is what I thought was going to work wasn't. What I thought wasn't going to be important is extremely important. So the ability to pivot along the way, just like you said, is 100% spot on.
Well, when I was in the financial business, Matt, and I was in it for 29 years, every year they come back and say, what's your goals for the year? I don't have any goals except one. go see X number of people. That's the one activity I could control. And if you're looking at this and you're saying, what should I do if I'm in sales? What is the activity that you can control? Go do it. And things are going to come up. I mean, look, we live in a world of AI. It's changing so fast. We don't know what the world's going to look like 90 days from now. Forget a year, 5 years. Just be willing to pivot and be coachable and adjustable. That's the way to succeed going forward.
Excellent. Okay, pay it forward. You can teach every professional just one lesson on money and one on career. What would those be?
Pay yourself first. Absolutely. Get into the habit of setting X amount aside and don't touch it. Career is really what we said before. Just pick a lane, start taking action. If you hit a roadblock, go around it. Now, the other side of that is don't get so stuck on, I'm going to be in this career and I'm going to grind it for 10 years and I may hate it. If you find after 2 or 3 years you really hate it, quit, go find something else. And we live in an age where I think entrepreneurism is going to be not golden, but platinum, because a lot of people are losing positions, but there's so many opportunities we don't even know yet exist that are going to be out there. So just think outside those traditional lines and go be creative. But yeah, don't get locked into any mindset that this is the way it is. Those days are gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Michael, you've given us a ton of useful advice and a bunch to think about. How can we get in touch with you?
Reach out to me, Michael at speakingcpr.com, or visit my website, speakingcpr.com. Or really the best way is LinkedIn. That's where I spend most of my time. So feel free to reach out to me. Now, this may shock you, but there's more than one Michael Davis in the world. So if you find Michael Davis Speaking CPR, that's how you'll find me on LinkedIn.
Michael, thank you so much for all the super valuable advice. This has been an absolutely wonderful session today.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
Okay, everybody, we will see you next time on Thrive and Achieve, where professionals help professionals thrive in their career and achieve financial success. Have a great day, everybody.